The room was silent. Not the kind of quiet that comes with peace, but the heavy, loaded silence that hits just before something unforgettable happens. Every royal, Charles, William, Anne, Harry, even Kate, sat still. Their eyes locked on one thing, a sealed envelope resting on the polished oak table. Inside it, the final will and testament of Queen Elizabeth II. But what shocked everyone even more than the content was who had been chosen to read it. Prince Andrew, yes, Andrew, stood at the center of the room, holding that envelope with trembling hands. It wasn't just unexpected. It was unimaginable. The man who had been pushed to the royal fringes was now reading the Queen's last words out loud. Was this a message? A quiet rebellion from the Queen herself? Or a chance at redemption for the most controversial royal? As Andrew opened the will, the wax seal cracked, and the sound echoed like thunder in the quiet chamber. "This is my last will and testament," he read, and just like that, Buckingham held its breath. But what was inside was more than anyone expected. Next came the realization that this will wasn't just about money. It was about something far more powerful. More than a fortune. Queen Elizabeth II had reigned for over 70 years, a lifetime of service spanning eras that reshaped the world. She'd seen the fall of empires, the rise of technology, family feuds turned public scandals, and a nation constantly redefining itself. And yet, in her final act, there was no crown, no throne, no speech from the balcony, just silence. And then the sound of Prince Andrew's voice, cracking open the last words she would ever speak to them. This was no ordinary will. It wasn't just a list of names followed by numbers or properties. No, it was something else entirely. It was personal, deeply personal. As Andrew read on, it became clear. This wasn't just a legal formality. It was a map, a carefully constructed blueprint, not just for who would receive what, but for how the monarchy itself would survive without her. "Legacy," she once said, "isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build while you're still here." And somehow, even in death, she was still building. Each family member was addressed not only with a gift, but with a message, a statement of belief, or a warning, a gesture of grace, or perhaps a gentle rebuke. Some messages were long, others just a few lines, but not a word felt accidental. To some, her words were warm, even maternal. To others, the tone was distant, but it all served one purpose: clarity. This was the Queen's final attempt to bind the royal family together, not with duty, but with understanding. She wasn't dividing her fortune. She was distributing her vision. Balmoral, Windsor, Sandringham, the Vladimir tiara. Letters, a sword, a handwritten note for a child who can barely write his own name. These weren't just inheritances, they were assignments, instructions, pieces of a greater plan. Her will had become a message in a bottle tossed across time, meant to be opened only when the monarchy felt itself drifting. She wasn't just speaking to us, one insider later said, she was speaking to the crown itself. But for every hopeful gesture, like Catherine's tiara or Louis's letter, there was a shadow, a reckoning. Because alongside gifts came silences, omissions, wording that stung just as deeply as any cut. And no one felt the sting of that more than her firstborn, King Charles III. He expected a mother's parting blessings. He received something else, something that would leave him still, quiet, and perhaps questioning the very throne he now sat upon. Because the Queen's legacy wasn't carved in stone, it was written in ink, and now those words were setting the royal family on a path no one expected. Up next, the crown was passed, but the message behind it, that was the real shock. Charles's unexpected disappointment. King Charles sat stiff in his chair, every muscle tense as Prince Andrew spoke his name. For years, decades, he had waited, watched, waited some more. His mother's reign, unshakable as stone, had outlasted presidents, prime ministers, and popes. And now, finally, it was his turn, his moment. But nothing could have prepared him for the chill that came next. "To my dear son Charles," Andrew read aloud, "I entrust Windsor Castle, and with it, the responsibility it represents." The room stilled. Charles didn't move. His fingers tapped lightly against the armrest. Once, twice, then stopped. That was it? Windsor Castle, the oldest royal residence still in use. A fortress, a symbol, a piece of the monarchy's soul. Yes, it was grand. Yes, it was expected. But where was the warmth? The personal note? The private memory? The soft acknowledgement of a son's lifelong wait? None came. There were no loving phrases, no recollections of boyhood moments or fatherhood milestones, no lines saying, "You have made me proud." It was formal. It was sterile. It was cold. And that cold seemed to wrap itself around Charles's chest like a vice. He blinked, once, his eyes shifting toward the table where the Queen's will lay open. His mouth tightened just slightly, and he lowered his gaze. The message, though short, rang out louder than any crown jewel. "You may have the throne, but do you have my trust?" It wasn't a snub. Not entirely. But it wasn't an embrace either. It was the kind of message that leaves room for reflection or regret. Perhaps it was the Queen's way of reminding her son that kingship is not a prize. It's a test, one that doesn't end at coronation. A whisper from the grave, "You wear the crown, Charles, but what will you do with it?" The others in the room seemed to feel it too. No one said a word, but glances were exchanged, quick, uncertain. William shifted slightly. Anne sat straighter, and Harry's eyes stayed fixed on the floor. Charles breathed in deeply, as if drawing strength from the very walls of Windsor. "It felt like a power handoff," said one royal insider, "but without the hug." Still, he didn't flinch. Not fully. Years of royal training had taught him how to endure moments like this, even when they hurt. But the Queen's message was clear. "The burden is yours now, Charles. Not just to wear the crown, but to hold together a family quietly breaking." And then, just as the air seemed to settle again, Andrew turned the page. A new name, a new gift. And this time, it wasn't a son who stirred emotion. It was a sister. And what she received said more about the Queen's heart than anyone had expected. The silent powerhouse princess. Anne didn't flinch when her name was read. She never does. But behind her calm eyes, something flickered. The Queen had given her Sandringham estate, the same place where generations of royals had gathered, celebrated, mourned, and reconnected. It was personal, powerful, and unexpected, because for years, Anne had been the quiet backbone of the royal family. No scandals, no demands, just duty, loyalty, and relentless work. And finally, it seemed, the Queen had seen it all, and rewarded it. "To my daughter Anne," the will read, "for your unwavering strength, I leave Sandringham. May it remain a place of gathering, just as you have always held us together." It was more than a gift. It was a crown of her own, one forged not in gold, but in respect. The room didn't clap. No one cheered. But the weight of the moment wasn't lost. Anne had been acknowledged, not as a spare, not as an afterthought, but as an anchor. And just when the family thought the surprises were done, came the decision that broke all tradition. The estate that broke tradition. When Balmoral was mentioned, the room froze. There was no rustle of fabric, no cough, no whispered breath, because Balmoral was sacred, not just to the monarchy, but to the Queen herself. It was where she found peace, where she was most human, where she walked her dogs without an entourage, where the noise of the world dimmed into pine trees and quiet hills. Balmoral wasn't a castle, it was a sanctuary. And for over a century, estates like Balmoral followed one rule. They passed from monarch to heir. One crown, one estate. That's how it had always been, but not this time. As Prince Andrew read the Queen's words, jaws didn't just drop, they locked. Balmoral, she wrote, belongs to this family, not to a title. Let it remain a place of peace for all of you, as it was for me. She didn't leave it to Charles, or to William, or to Anne, or Edward, or even Harry. She left it to everyone. A collective inheritance, a shared future. It was unheard of. A royal estate, especially that estate, split among the family. The Queen had just rewritten one of the monarchy's oldest, quietest rules. Why? Maybe she'd seen what we all had, a family splintering, brother against brother, heir versus spare, Camilla in one corner, Catherine in another, private pain leaking into public scandal. Maybe this was her final bid, not for control, but for connection. This wasn't about land, one insider later said. It was about legacy, emotional legacy. She wanted Balmoral to be a place where they were forced to cross paths, where they'd have to walk the same halls, eat at the same long oak table, remember the same stories. A shared estate, a shared burden, a shared reason to stay close. But make no mistake, shared inheritance can also mean shared tension. Who would organize holidays? Who would have access when? What if Catherine wanted a weekend, but Harry had already claimed it? What if Anne refused to attend because Camilla was there? She gave them Balmoral, someone whispered, but she also gave them a test. The Queen was gone, but her grip on the monarchy remained, gently, thoughtfully, woven into every word of that will. She wasn't choosing sides. She was leaving them no excuse not to meet in the middle. Balmoral, once a quiet Scottish retreat, had suddenly become a royal crossroads, a symbol of unity, or the battleground of something far worse. And as that decision settled like a fog over the room, another gift was about to emerge. This one wrapped not in land or legacy, but diamonds. Because the next name read was Catherine's, and the Queen was about to hand her more than just jewels. She was handing her the crown of public faith. Catherine's royal crown moment. It glimmered like a message written in diamonds. As Prince Andrew gently unwrapped the velvet pouch, the room leaned in. Inside was the Vladimir tiara, a crown rich in history, once worn by queens, and passed only to those who carry more than beauty, responsibility. And this time, it was going to Catherine. Not just a piece of jewelry, not just a royal heirloom. It was a message, clear, powerful, impossible to miss. To Catherine, the Queen had written, I entrust the tiara that has long symbolized elegance, dignity, and endurance. She didn't say, my granddaughter-in-law. She didn't say, the Duchess of Cambridge. She called her by name, Catherine, as if to say, you are family now, you are ready. There was no flash of emotion on Catherine's face. She kept her composure, as always, but those who knew her best caught it. A flicker in her eyes, a single breath, a little deeper than the last. She understood what this meant. The Queen wasn't just passing down diamonds, she was passing the torch. In that moment, the monarchy shifted, not because of wealth, but because of trust. The Queen had seen something in Catherine, something the world had come to see too. Steadiness, warmth, strength that doesn't shout, but stands firm when everything else shakes. Catherine didn't need to say a word. The tiara did the talking for her, and as the whispers rippled around the room, a name that hadn't been spoken in a while came next. and with it, the room shifted again. Because what came for Harry, no one saw coming. Reconciliation or reminder? It was small, silver, barely the size of a shoebox. But when Prince Andrew read the Queen's words aloud, the silence in the room became unbearable. To my grandson Harry, I leave the silver box that once belonged to my father, King George VI. Within it are letters, words of strength, of duty, of family. A hush fell so heavy it nearly crushed the air out of the room. No one moved, no one breathed. The box was just an object, cold metal, sealed memories, but the message behind it hit like thunder. Why Harry? The same Harry who had left, who had rejected the firm, who had publicly questioned the monarchy's heart and history. And yet, here he was, being handed a box tied to the core of the royal identity. This wasn't just any heirloom, this was King George's box, the Queen's father's private container for his most personal words. A man who led Britain through war, a monarch who stood for everything Harry had turned from. So why was the Queen passing it to him? Was it forgiveness? Was it guilt? Or was it a reminder of what he'd chosen to walk away from? Harry didn't flinch. His eyes locked forward. Not a nod, not a word, not a single crack. But William? William's jaw tensed. His fists curled tighter in his lap. His stare cut through the quiet, like ice. He'd stayed, done everything expected, sacrificed privacy, comfort, even his peace, for the crown. Yet here sat his brother, exiled by choice, being handed one of the monarchy's deepest tokens of legacy. Is this a peace offering or a provocation? Someone later whispered behind palace walls. But make no mistake, this wasn't about the box itself. This was about the message inside it. Not the paper, not the ink, but the idea. Harry, no matter where you are, you still belong. You still carry royal blood. You still have a role, if you choose to return to it. Maybe this was the Queen's last act of hope, not to rewrite the past, but to keep the door open to the future. She knew what this would stir. She wasn't naive. She knew the press would speculate, the family would squirm, and yet she did it anyway. A whisper from the past, one royal aide described it. A nudge. A question left unanswered. Will you ever come home? And just as the weight of that moment settled into every corner of the room, Andrew turned the page. His fingers trembled slightly. The next words weren't softer. They were sharper, heavier. Because what came next wasn't symbolic. It was a sword, and it would slice through the silence with a force no one was ready for. The sword that cut through silence. No one expected it, not even Harry. Prince Andrew turned another page and paused, almost as if to prepare the room for impact. To my grandson Harry, I leave the ceremonial sword of King George VI, a symbol of service, sacrifice, and leadership. That was it. But that one sentence struck harder than anything that came before. The ceremonial sword wasn't just a keepsake. It was a symbol of royal duty, used in coronations, military events, solemn ceremonies. It represented the very heart of the monarchy. And now, it was being handed to the one who had walked away. You could hear the shift in the room. William leaned forward slightly, his knuckles white. Charles's eyes dropped to the floor. Anne, ever still, only blinked. Why him? Some saw it as hope, a chance to pull Harry back in, a nudge from the Queen to remember who he once was, and who he still could be. Others saw it differently, a message sharp as the blade itself. You may have stepped away, but you carry this forever. Even if Harry never held the sword in public, the symbolism would follow him for life. The weight of tradition is not in the crown, the Queen once said, but in the hands of those asked to carry it. Was this a burden? A blessing? No one could say. But the Queen had spoken, and her choices were only getting bolder. Because what came next was not loud, not dramatic, but quietly, strategically powerful. Edward's quiet reward. If anyone had expected a grand gift, it wasn't Prince Edward. He had never been flashy, never grabbed headlines. He simply worked. Behind the scenes, loyal, patient, constant. And maybe that's exactly why the Queen gave him Bagshot Park, a peaceful estate, modest by royal standards, but steeped in tradition. A place for someone who wasn't chasing power, but serving it. To my youngest son Edward, she wrote, I leave Bagshot Park, and with it, my hope that you will continue to serve with dignity and discretion. It was a quiet reward, but a meaningful one. No swords, no glittering crowns, just responsibility and recognition. Because while others battled for the spotlight, Edward had simply shown up again and again and again. The Queen saw that, and now she wanted the world to see it too. In that moment, Edward didn't smile. He simply nodded, like a soldier receiving quiet orders. And maybe, in a way, he was. This wasn't a thank you. It was a new assignment. And while the spotlight dimmed for a second, Andrew turned the page again. The next names weren't children or heirs. They were the heirs of the future. And what the Queen left for them was more than jewels. The children inherit the future. It wasn't about tiaras this time, or castles, or swords. It was about knowledge. When Andrew read the names George and Charlotte, everyone sat straighter. Because these weren't just royal children, they were the monarchy's next generation. To my great-grandchildren George and Charlotte, I leave not only treasures, but lessons in the form of books, letters, and reflections, so that they may grow not just into royals, but into leaders. This wasn't about preparing for the throne. This was about preparing for life. Charlotte, the poised and confident spark. George, the heir whose shoulders would one day carry a kingdom. And the Queen saw them both, not just as titles in waiting, but as people who needed wisdom before wealth. The room was still. It was a powerful reminder that the monarchy lives not in palaces, but in people. The Queen didn't want them to repeat history. She wanted them to understand it. Through this act, she gave them the most valuable inheritance of all, the chance to be better than what came before. And yet, there was one more child to speak of, one more name, and what he received would show the Queen's heart like never before. The personal touch. And then came a name no one expected to hear so soon. Prince Louis. Too young to understand titles, too young to remember the Queen's voice. But still, he had something waiting for him. Something no crown or castle could ever replace. To my great-grandson Louis, Andrew read, I leave a letter, written by hand, from me to you, to guide you as you grow. A gasp, soft but real. Even Anne raised her eyes. It wasn't about property, not jewels, not history. It was pure emotion. This letter wasn't for headlines. It wouldn't hang in a museum or be stored in a royal archive. It was meant for Louis alone. A private connection between great-grandmother and great-grandson, across generations and beyond life itself. No one knew what the letter said. No one even asked. That silence? That was respect. And maybe that was exactly what the Queen wanted. In a world where so much of royal life is performance, she left Louis something real, something he could open one day when the noise quiets, and the weight of who he is begins to settle in. Even in death, the Queen was nurturing the future, one child at a time. But her vision didn't stop with the youngest, because the next gift was for the king himself, and it wasn't what anyone was expecting. The private papers of a queen, not gold, not diamonds, not a throne. To King Charles, his mother left something far more powerful, her words. To my son, I leave my personal writings, My letters, my diaries, my reflections. Not for the public. For your eyes only." Andrew's voice dropped as he read. You could feel the weight of it hit Charles in real time. These papers, decades of thoughts, fears, triumphs, were the Queen's inner world. Her confessions, her compass. And now, they belonged to him. What secrets did they hold? What truths about the crown, the family, even her regrets? No one knew. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just a gift. It was a responsibility. Use them to understand, she wrote, to reflect, to remember who we are and why we serve. Charles looked stunned, and maybe unprepared, because this wasn't permission to rule. It was a blueprint to lead. He held the crown, yes, but now he also held the Queen's rawest thoughts, her blueprint for the monarchy's survival in a world that was changing faster than ever. And just like that, the room knew. Her voice hadn't gone silent. It had simply moved into ink. But with this legacy came tension. Some royals had received treasures. Others had been left puzzled. So the question remained, what now? What happens now? The Queen had spoken, but her words, while clear, had left the royal family in disarray. Some were honored. Some felt overlooked. Others, like Harry and William, seemed trapped in silent conflict. The room was full of people, yet no one truly spoke. Because this will had done more than distribute keepsakes. It had exposed the fractures that never healed. Charles with his writings, Harry with his symbols of duty, William, still waiting, still holding back. The Queen had not chosen sides. Instead, she had created a map, one that only worked if everyone walked it together. But would they? Could the same family that had barely survived scandal after scandal now rally around her final wishes? Or had she, in trying to heal them, pulled back the curtain on how deep the wounds still ran? Family is a bond by blood, the Queen once said, but also a choice we make every day. Now, the choice was theirs, and in the silence that followed the last line of the will, that truth echoed louder than any title ever could. But she wasn't done yet, because her final words, written in ink and sealed with purpose, were a message for them all. A call to unity. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. "If I leave you anything," Andrew read slowly, "let it be this. Stay together, love one another. The monarchy cannot survive without unity. Not gold, not orders, just hope." The Queen didn't ask them to forget the past. She asked them to fight for the future. Together. Even now, after a lifetime of ruling empires, waving from balconies and surviving crises that could have ended at a dynasty. All she wanted was for her family to be a family. The silence in the room turned to emotion. Not everyone cried, but no one could pretend it hadn't hit them. It wasn't about power anymore. It was about peace. The Queen had seen what division could do, from Diana's heartbreak to Harry's departure, to Charles's long, painful path to the throne. She had lived it, and now she was asking her family to be better, to choose each other before everything else crumbled. It was the simplest request in the entire will, and yet the hardest one to honor. But that's what made her a monarch to the very end. Still, her words left one final question hanging in the air. What will they do now? Where do they go from here? The Queen was gone. The papers were folded. The heirlooms packed. The air still thick with things unsaid. Charles held her diaries. Harry held the sword. William, the future, held nothing at all. But everything weighed on him. And this is where the story pauses, not with closure, but with consequence. Because every gift from the Queen was more than an inheritance. It was a test. And now, the future of the monarchy hangs not on a crown, but on whether this family can answer the final question she left behind. Can they eat without falling apart? Prince William stepped outside first that day, his face pale, his mind racing. What would he do now? Stay silent? Step forward? Challenge what he saw as unfair? Or hold the pieces together? The weight of the crown, the Queen once said, is not just in ruling, but in forgiving. And maybe that's what this will was really about. Not land, not gold, but forgiveness. The royal family now stands on a knife's edge, united only if they choose to be. Divided, if old wounds win again. The Queen left them everything: wisdom, warning, and a window. Now, it's up to them to open it, or let it close forever. Because the will is done. The Queen is gone. But the real question still remains: will they rise, or will they ruin everything she built? Let us know what you believe in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more royal revelations coming your way.